Okay, well, I think that we're live, so let's get going. Итак, здравствуйте, ребята, добрый день. Сегодня четвертый, последний теоретический вебинар на тему поиска работы в Австралии. С нами сегодня Инека Ранги, специалист HR здесь, в Брисбене, и она расскажет про этап, когда вы уже получили job offer, когда вы уже собираетесь приступать к работе, и про все практические нюансы и детали, связанные с этим. Okay, so our today's topic is working in Australia, actually starting that work and all the practicalities connecting to that. So Inika, thank you for joining us today, and I'm passing over to you now.
Thank you. And welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our fourth session in this webinar series that we've created. As we mentioned, today will be about working in Australia. So this session will be recorded. We'll make sure the presentation with the links are available online later for you to watch again if you'd like. If you have any questions throughout the series, please put them in the chat and we'll make sure to check regularly and answer them as best we can. So today I'm going to be talking about working in Australia. So once you've finally got the job offer, things to do and get ready before you start. And some of these things you can get organised before you even arrive in Australia. We like to call it life admin. So I'll talk you through what websites you can have a look at to try and get ready so that you're ready to start the job as soon as possible, but also explain some unique things to Australia and working here. So we'll talk about entitlements or benefits that come with certain jobs, life administration, as I mentioned, so talking about tax, super, Medicare, skills assessments, so for anyone who has a trade or a profession that you need to have recognised in Australia to let you work in that profession, and then what flexible working options could be available to you. So we'll start with entitlements or benefits. So depending on the job, the company and the industry, there could be some benefits or entitlements available to you. So it's important to understand what they might be and where you can check if you're not sure. Now, these should be listed in your contract. So when you get the job offer, it should be listed in there for you, but I've got some links to help just in case. So what are these benefits in Australia? So as I said, depending on the type of role that you get, there will be some minimum standards. And we have talked about these in some of our other sessions, but typically it's pay, conditions, and conditions can be the hours, so how long you're expected to work in a shift or a day, and also leave or holidays. So for pay, there is a national minimum as at last year. So if you get a full-time or a part-time job, the minimum you should expect to be paid per hour as an adult is $20.33. If you get a casual offer, which has less conditions or benefits like overtime and leave payments, you get a higher pay. So that gives you a bit of coverage for not receiving those benefits. And that casual minimum rate is $25.41 an hour. If you're a junior, so younger than 18, or an apprentice, so you are learning a trade, these pay rates will be lower again, but there will be other benefits that balance it out to make it worthwhile. So it's important to know which type of contract you've been offered, full-time, part-time, or casual, to be able to work out the minimum. Most companies will pay more than this, but this is the bare minimum you should expect. So hopefully that will help with having a think about rental properties and other costs for you and your family to know or expect what you might be earning. So I've put a link in there, which is a free calculator where you can go online and check. So you can type in the type of job or the profession or the industry, and it will give you an indication so you can work out if your pay meets these standards. Likewise, if you get a contract and it gives you what your pay is for a whole year, you can put it in this calculator and work out what your hourly rate would be. Again, just to check and make sure you feel comfortable. And I would say check this before you accept the job or the contract, just to make sure it's what you expected. There's also some maximum hours that you could be expected to work in a week. And again, it depends on the type of job and the industry you're in. So if you're working in a cafe, it will be very different to if you're working in an IT company. But what most contracts will do is list the hours you're expected to work, or when you get offered the job, they will give you an indication of how many shifts. So 38 hours a week plus a reasonable amount of overtime, and this varies by industry, will also be the maximum you could be expecting to work. You can work more if you want, but these are standards that are set by the government. And again, I've put a link in there so you can check the industry that you might be looking to work in to understand what those maximum hours could be. Some things that the employer will take into account is, do you have caring responsibilities? Do you need to get home to look after parents, children? Do you have a really long commute, so you don't want to be finishing at 11 o'clock at night after doing overtime? So it's important to have a conversation with your employer so they know what your circumstances are when they're working out who they might ask to work later or assigning certain work. So I'll just pause there. Are there any questions? Because that was, no? Great, okay. This next slide might be a bit hard with our faces on the screen, but I tried to make a simple table, not that simple, over some entitlements or benefits. And then depending on whether you get offered a full-time, part-time or casual contract, here are some benefits or entitlements you could expect. So we've had this question in a previous series around notice of termination. So if you are full-time or part-time, you need to be given at least 1 to 5 weeks notice, depending on your contract, it will say. If you're casual, they don't need to give you notice. They could just say, tomorrow, don't come back. So that's why, again, casual contracts, you often get paid more to give you some protection or buffer. Annual leave or holidays, they might be called in the Ukraine. So this is, again, dependent on the type of contract, but it's paid time off to have the school holidays, spend time with your family. And again, if you are a full-time or part-time worker, it will be 4 weeks a year, or if you are part-time, it will be prorated, so it will be adjusted. So if you work 4 days a week, you would get a reduced amount of the 4 weeks annual leave a year. So you would effectively get close to 3 weeks leave paid. And that's for you to talk to your employer around when you'd like to take that time off. Most people take it off to spend with their family, but that's once you've started working, you have this leave that you've got access to. As a casual employee, most situations you won't have any paid leave. Again, that's why you get a higher pay rate. Sick leave, so when you are unwell or if you have a direct family member, so a partner or a child, it could be called carers leave. Every industry, you have access to 2 unpaid days per illness. So on top of this, if you are full-time or part-time, you can accrue, so you can earn paid leave as well. So again, it's better if you have a family or caring responsibilities to potentially go for a more stable contract, which is full-time or part-time. If you don't have as many caring responsibilities or you need more money quicker to set yourselves up, which is very understandable, casual might work better for you. We then have public holidays or bank holidays, where we have 9 in Queensland a year. And these, again, are either paid if you're on a part-time, full-time contract, or they are unpaid if you are a casual. You can be asked to work these public holidays, but you are also able to refuse or deny it. If you want the time off, you need to look after family or children, you can say no to your employer. If you choose to work as a casual, you actually get a higher rate of pay again because it's a public holiday. So it's a good way to earn more money quickly, but depends on your circumstance. We then have compassionate leave, which is another form of day off. And this is, unfortunately, if there is a death or an illness in the family. If you are on a full-time, part-time contract, it is paid and 2 days per occasion. If you are on a casual contract, you can access 2 days unpaid. Parental leave, so if you are having a baby or your partner is having a baby, you can access unpaid for 12 months or up to 2 years, where your employer must hold your job for you while you are off. If you are on a full-time, part-time contract, you can access paid parental leave as well, whereas in a casual contract, it's always unpaid. Finally, the last type of leave we have is long service leave, which Australia, to my knowledge, is the only country that offers long service leave. And this is to reward employees for staying with the company for 10 years. So it's quite complicated as a type of leave. So it builds up the longer you stay with your company. It's different in every state. So if you move to Sydney, it will be different if you move to Melbourne, to Brisbane. So on the screen, I've only listed the long service relevant for people coming to Queensland, to Brisbane. So after 10 years of service, you get access to quite a few weeks of paid leave. After 7 years, in circumstances, you're able to access a portion early. If you were to be made redundant or to resign after 7 years, you will have this paid out for what you've accrued. So it's really trying to reward people for staying with a company or an organisation for quite a long time. And it's important to note that you might have several different jobs in a company. So you might come in and start working in one area, and then as you build up your confidence, you build up your English speaking skills, you might move up the company or into other areas. If you stay with that company for that period, regardless of how many jobs, you will be accruing long service leave. So as I said, I don't know of another country that has this. Is there a question?
Yeah, but if you change a company, even within the industry, you would lose that opportunity. Is that right?
Correct, yes. So you need to stay with the same employer. So you can have different jobs, same company. Some companies are linked. So they have like a big pyramid up the top, and they have multiple they might have like 3 restaurants, and you might move between those restaurants. As long as you stay with that same employer, you will keep your long service. But if you, as you said, if you move into a different company, different industry, you would lose it. So I do have a link to these types of leave in more detail if you'd like to read further. These should all be listed in your contract. So when you get the job offer, it will list what your entitlements are. All of these entitlements link back to an award, which we spoke about in the first session that we did. So your contract should say what your entitlements are or what award you are being employed under. If you're not sure, ask, and ask before you accept the job. So you can go and Google and just work out what you would be entitled to. I think it's very important, particularly if you have family to look after, if maybe more family are coming to join you when they can get their visas or they can get over here. It's important to know because you might need a day off to pick them up from the airport, or you might need a day off to see your children to school, those sorts of things. So it's important to understand. Were there any more questions before I move on? No? Okay. So the next session or segment I've called Life Administration, which is things to get you ready, to get you set up. A lot of these are really important to set up as soon as possible, and you could set them up before you get a job to make sure that you don't pay any unnecessary fees or extra tax to the government by not having them set up. So wherever you're watching in the world, you should try to get a few of these set up as soon as possible to make it easier when you do arrive, or if you're already here, hopefully you've heard about these things and you have either applied or are getting organised. So the first is tax. So all Australian workers pay tax on their income to the government. And this money goes towards government projects like roads, schools, hospitals, and it is a percentage of what you earn. Your employer is responsible for calculating the amount you should pay tax, and they will pay that directly to the tax office, or ATO, Australian Tax Office. They will pay that for you. Then once a year, you are expected to do a tax return where you could get money paid back to you. So it's like forced savings. Or if your employer hasn't calculated your tax correctly throughout the year, or you've changed jobs, or you've got a pay rise, you might need to pay money, extra money, to the government. So our tax year goes from 1 July to 30 June. So we are coming towards the end of a tax year. You can do these tax returns online via the MyGov website, or if you're not sure or you're not comfortable, or if it looks like you're having to pay money back and that doesn't feel right, go to see a tax accountant. And you can find an accountant that will do your tax for you, for your family. You will need to pay them, but you can claim the fee that you pay the accountant in your next year. So you get money back for paying someone to do it. My advice, because I'm terrible with anything to do with numbers or money, is pay someone to do it, because you don't want to be paying money that you shouldn't be paying. And I've had a lot of friends and employees who have had to pay money in the first year, and when they've gone to get a tax accountant to do it, they've done it wrong, because it's very confusing. So my advice would be look at getting some help, particularly for your first year, to make sure that you're getting it right. So to be able to pay tax and to not pay too much tax, you need a tax file number, TFN. And this is a unique number, like a social security number, if you maybe had something like that in the Ukraine. A unique number to you, and that is how you give that to your employer when you start the job with them. And it's also how they then know to pay the tax office on your behalf. And it is also how you will then get your tax return each year. So whether you're in Australia or you're not yet here, but you're on your way, go online via this link and apply for a tax file number. So all you'll need is your passport and an Australian address. So if you have organised temporary accommodation, can you use that address? Do you have friends or family here that you can use their address to be able to apply for this number online? But you need this before you start work. Any questions on tax? No? Okay, the next thing is superannuation, or a pension. And this is a way of saving for when you retire, when you finish work, which sounds crazy given we're talking about getting a job here, but eventually you will hopefully stop working. And this is a way the government helps you save for when you retire. So your employer will be responsible for paying your superannuation. And this is a minimum, or the standard is 10% of your salary, your yearly earnings. So they each pay will take 10% and put it into a fund. Now you can either pick your own fund, so you can do some research and find the best one for you, or your employer will have a fund that they can set up for you, which might be easy. It's one less thing to research, and you can always change it and move the money later if you want to. Now, there are things to look for when you are setting up your, comparing your own fund and selecting your own fund. There is a lot of websites that help you compare the funds, and I have a link at the bottom to help you compare which funds might be best for you. Some have higher interest opportunities and more investment options. Some are very safe and standard and will just give you a guaranteed return. The important thing is you can't access your super until a certain age, and that depends on the year you were born. So between 55 to 60 is the earliest you could access that, unless you become quite unwell, in which case you can access it early. But check, because all the funds will list any fees, they'll list options to access it earlier. Be careful, because it really shouldn't be accessed before it's intended. And if you access it early, sometimes you can get a higher fee. But they will all list what they offer and what you get in return. So I'd use one of these comparison websites to decide. But again, you either need to make the decision to go with your employer fund or to have picked your own fund before you start working, because that is something they will ask when you get hired. And this is whether you are a casual employee, a full-time or part-time employee, everyone gets paid super. Okay, any questions? It hopefully will make sense once you start working. Okay, the next is an Australian bank account. It's important to get an Australian bank account so you can get paid. It's also important so that you can get a phone SIM card, so you can get a travel card if you get public transport. You'll need a bank account to apply for a rental property, set up Medicare. All these things link back to having a bank account. And there are several Australian banks that will allow you to set this up on a tourist visa. So you don't need to wait until you get your working visa or a more permanent visa. There are several accounts that are called immigrant friendly, and I've listed two of these on the screen. So CBA is the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and NAB. They both offer immigrant-friendly bank accounts, which help you to set this up before you even arrive in Australia. So again, this is something you could do whether you're transiting through Poland, if you're on your way here. Really important to set up the bank account as soon as possible, so you can try and set up your lives here as quickly as possible. So with these applications, we have 4 big banks in Australia, and then we have some smaller, more personalised banks. The 2 that I've listed that are immigrant friendly are 2 of the big banks, and they will let you set up different accounts. We have 2 basic accounts, an everyday account for spending and a savings account for saving money. Online, there will be heaps of information when you're looking to set up a bank. You can type into Google, set up Australian bank account, and options will come up and articles will come up so that you can read them at your leisure. But make sure you check which ones will let you set up a bank account with your tourist visa versus which ones need you to have your working permitted visa. Usually with the immigrant-friendly bank accounts, you can set them all up online, and then at the very end, they will ask you to come in person to prove who you are. So that is where you would bring your passport and your visa in. But you can have your account already set up before that stage, and you can start putting money in to that account. So if you're looking to transfer any Ukrainian money over to Australia, again, you can do that on your way here. Are there any questions there? One thing as well, if you are looking to move money from the Ukraine in your Ukrainian currency to Australian dollars, there are some portals that let you do this with lower fees. There are a few. The one that I have used personally is Transferwise. So I'll make sure that we link that with this presentation, because it gives you lower fees of what the current market is offering in currency conversion, and that just means that you don't lose too much money transferring over. Okay, so the next might not be obvious, but is relevant depending on getting to your job interview, getting to a job, if you are looking to drive. So there is always public transport, so a bus, a train, a ferry. In Brisbane, depending on where you live, it's easier, and other areas it's harder. It's a very spread out city that we live in. Driving is what most people do because it's hot and we are quite spread out. In terms of driving in Australia, you have 3 months to drive on your Ukrainian driver's license before you need to get an Australian license. So you don't need to rush and get that straight away, but you have 3 months before you need to move to an Australian license. So it's something to think about if you perhaps don't get a job straight away, maybe get your driving license sorted earlier so you don't need to worry about it once you've started work. To drive, you need to have a valid license, so either your Ukrainian license or another international license, and you need to have a car that is registered, so it's allowed to be on the road. So you need to pay, or the owner has to have paid to have that car on the road. If you are driving with a license but not a registered car, you can get a big fine from the police, which you don't need. So it's important to make sure that you have those 2 pieces of paper to identify. I've linked down the bottom to the Transport website to have a look at how to apply for an Australian licence. There is a written test, a knowledge test, and then there's a practical test, and then there's an eyesight test, which is important, right, to make sure that you can see what you're doing. The laws are very strict, particularly in Queensland, so you need to make sure that you understand what the laws are before you are driving on the roads. Some things are very different from Europe, like we drive on the left, you're used to driving on the right. Also, the way that we park is different, so it's important that you are comfortable before you get in a car. Like I said, you might need driving ability to get to your job interview or to get to work. As I said, we do have public transport. To be able to travel on our public transport, so a bus, a train, or a ferry, so a boat, you will need a Go card. And this is a card that has money loaded onto it. You can't pay at the bus or the train. They won't let you on. You need to have a special Go card to be able to get onto public transport. So that's something to have organised before you try to travel. And you can pick these up from local shops and have money put on them that you can then top up. So you put more money on them as you spend it. Are there any questions before we move on? No? Hopefully I haven't scared everyone off the roads. Good. Alrighty. So the next topic I wanted to discuss is the skills assessment. So depending on what job you go for, you might have qualifications back home that you need recognised in Australia to make sure that you get the job that you're suitable for. Now, it's hard for me to talk in too much detail without knowing your specific qualification. So this is quite a general slide. We have 37 different bodies that will assess your skills. So depending on whether you are a lawyer, an engineer, a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, a pilot, will depend on which authority you go to have your skills assessed and translated to Australia. It's really important to make sure that you get a job that you are happy with, that pays you well, and that recognises your experience and qualifications from home, from the Ukraine. And so these I've linked down the bottom. So the first one is for professions, The second one is for a trade. So if you are a painter, a builder, a plumber, electrician, these are the links that you would look. So if you aren't sure which category, if you can email us, then we can help direct you to the right area and the right body that will then tell you what documents they might need. If you weren't able to bring those documents with you from the Ukraine, they will have another option to be able to do that assessment for you. Because they will recognise that some people had more notice than others. Yes, question.
Do all professions require assessment? Can people start working without assessing their profession first?
They can. It depends on the profession. If you are a doctor, no, you will need to have that assessment. If you are working in a restaurant, a cafe, a nursing home, so aged care, you won't need to have that assessment done before. So it's just important to, if you can get it done first, great. Otherwise, speak to your employer or the recruiter and ask them. And there might be a period of time, like they might give you 3 months to get that assessment done, and they might give you time off to do it as well. So if getting the job and the money is more important first, I would just ask at the time you're being offered the job. If you are still applying, I would recommend trying to get it done first because it will make you more attractive as a person to hire, but understand not everyone has the time or the money, but also some professions do not need this. Okay. So again, that was quite brief, but without knowing specifics, I could spend all night talking about it. So then finally, I wanted to talk about flexible working. So thanks to COVID, we have learnt to work differently, and that can mean working remotely, so working from home, or it could mean your hours are different because you might be working at night when the children are asleep, or you might have, several things that you do at one time. So we have a lot of flexible working options in Australia. Now, these will depend on your job, whether it's possible. Some jobs, it's not possible for you to work from home because you need to be in that restaurant, or you need to be at that school or the hospital or whatever. But it's worth having a discussion with your new employer or with the recruiter, and just asking. So it could be, I have young children, I need flexible hours because I need to be able to drop them off at school and I need to pick them up, or I need to feed them and bath them and put them to bed, and then I will get online later and work later. So it really just depends on the employer, but it's important to have that conversation if it's an option. You have the right to ask in any job, but if it's not possible in the job, the employer will explain why and will try and see if there's another way that they can help you. So often it will be listed in the job ad because it's a way for an employer to attract talent or to attract people to apply. Otherwise, it's mentioned in the interview or when the role is offered to you. I've given 3 main examples there. So hours is really common, flexible hours. So either your start, your finish times, or maybe you get paid for a full week, but you only work 4 days because you work longer days. That's what's called a compressed work week, where you're squeezing it into shorter days. But it could mean that you have every Friday off to take your kids to swimming lessons or spend them with your family. Location, as I mentioned, working from home, very common now, or what's called satellite offices. So the company saves money by not having a big office in the city. They have smaller offices in different locations, and you can find a satellite office closer to where you live. So large companies now have offices at the coast, so near the beach. because a lot of people aren't commuting to the city. Sounds like the dream, right? It does happen. Usually the bigger companies do that. And then finally, the pattern of work. So doing shifts, so not the same days or the same hours each week, or job sharing. So you might only work 2 days a week and you share with someone who works 3 days a week. You do the same role, but you share the work in that week. So again, these are just some examples. There are so many options. As I said, employers use these as a way to attract people, so they try and sell them to you. So it's important to work out what might be helpful for you. I know a lot of people who don't want to work from home because they like to get out of their pajamas, they like to go to work in the office, they like to be able to leave work and then come home. So it really just depends on your personal circumstance and what you prefer, and also the job that you get. So that was the main topics I wanted to cover. So it's a little shorter than previous sessions, but as I said, we've got some links there to give you more information. I also did put a page at the end here on Medicare, which isn't directly related to work, but it comes in that category of life admin. So something that you should set up when you move here. I've checked with the visas that you will be moving to once you move from your tourist visa. You will actually have access to Medicare, which is our national healthcare system, which provides either subsidised, so cheaper, or free healthcare. You can access hospitals, help with out-of-pocket expenses, or subsidised medicines. Really important to get Medicare set up. It is admin, so it takes paperwork and you have to go in person to apply for it, but it's really worth it, particularly if you're coming with a family, to have this set up for you when you move to Australia. It's one of the benefits of you moving here. You first apply for a temporary number, and then this department, it's a government department, once it has all of the necessary information from you, they will then send you a card, which is what that picture on the screen looks like, and that will list you and any of your family members on that card. And when you go to the doctor, if you go to a hospital, you will show them this Medicare card to help with the payment. So I've linked more information there. You will need to take your passport and your visa. They're 2 documents that they will ask for. But I thought that was an important bit of life admin that, again, is something that you should look at applying for when you move here. So that was it in terms of content. Are there any questions about what we've talked about, or anything more general that you'd like us to cover or send links? No? Okay. So hopefully that was helpful. It is quite general because it will depend a lot depending on the job that you get. We have talked about doing some follow-up face-to-face sessions, which we need to coordinate, and then we can provide more information there. But I'll hand back to you, Tanya.
Yeah, thanks very much, Inika. Thanks for your time and for preparing all these presentations, and going outside the actual job search is really very helpful indeed. I am going to put all of these 4 presentations into one archive, and I'm going to send it out to people who need this. All of these presentations will be also listed in the description of every video, so you can follow the link and view every presentation in particular. Follow all the links within the presentation and research about your own profession, your own situation. And if you're already in Brisbane, you can contact me, and Inika and I will coordinate these live face-to-face sessions to help you with your own situation. So thanks very much for your attention. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Inika. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again face-to-face live. here in Brisbane. Okay, take care and have a lovely week ahead. Bye-bye.